thanks for coming today. Just by way of introduction, my name's Andrew Packer. I'm a second-year full-time MBA here at Haas, and we're really excited to talk about the Garwood Center for Open Innovation, for Corporate Innovation here on campus. The purpose of today is to just do an overview of what the center is. It's kind of, historically, it's been known as, and I'm sure as Professor Chesbrough will mention, the best kept secret at Haas. It's we're trying to change our reputation and sort of get the word out there and open up our challenges to a broader group this year. So I'll let Henry go over all of that and sort of what the center does, how the center operates, and some of the academic theory behind it. And then the second half of the session is going to be spent largely going over the specific challenges that we have with member clients this year, or member firms of the Open Innovation Center. And then addressing questions around the application process, the Berkeley Innovation Forum, all of that on the back end. But it's purely just, if you have questions, I think we can, just field them as they come along, and then maybe we can wait till the end if we're not making a lot of progress. But by all means, just supposed to be very casual, high level, informative. We do have pizza coming. They only opened up at 11, so it should be here at around 11:50 noon. So we'll take a break halfway through to get lunch and all that. But that is coming. With that, I know we have Professor Darwin coming in as well at some point, and he'll give an overview of the challenges. But before we dive into the specifics of that, Professor Chesbrough, if you want to come up and introduce the center, Open Innovation, and all the work that you've been doing, and we can go from there.
Oh, Andrew, thank you. So the mic's working. You can hear me, right? Good. And my colleague Solomon Darwin here as well. You'll be hearing a lot more from him about our challenges. So, where to begin? Let's begin just with a short introduction to me. I've been at Haas now for 20 years. And before I was at Haas, I taught at Harvard Business School. You might have heard of them over on the East Coast. And I actually taught with Clay Christensen, and I taught his course with him for 2 years. So I really got a deep immersion in disruptive technology, disruptive innovation, and also something that I took from Harvard and from Clay was trying to connect theory to practice, and not just coming up with cool ideas and interesting theories, but looking at what companies are actually doing, and often looking at the challenges that they're facing. And then using those challenges to pull theory to help. So if you have the theory with no application, it can get pretty academic. But if you're just solving companies' problems without the help of any theory, it can be very ad hoc, and there may not be much learning that can come from that. So if we can combine them, now we've got something. So that's something I kind of took from them. Before I was a teacher, I actually worked for 10 years in the computer industry down in Silicon Valley. Spent most of those years in a hard disk drive company called Quantum. I was there for almost 10 years as an employee and another 5 as a consultant. Great experience, great company. When I joined Quantum, and I'm going to date myself now, 1983, when the Earth was still cooling, there were more than 150 hard disk drive companies around the world. Today, there are maybe 2, depending on how you count, which is one reason why I am no longer working in the hard disk drive industry. It turned out the industry consolidated. And these things called networks, and later on clouds, meant that we had lots of ways to store data beyond the hard disk in your laptop. So that's a little bit about me. So I actually have some practice in my own background, as well as a PhD and a bunch of years teaching. So when we talk about connecting theory and practice, it's something I've lived myself. Okay, so that's a little bit about me. When I came to Berkeley, this book I had written called Open Innovation had just come out. So Berkeley got a good deal here because Harvard paid for the research and Berkeley got the credit. Turns out you can only do that once, but still it worked out pretty well. So when I came to Haas, the book was starting to get some attention, and companies were calling, asking, what is this? How does it work? Who's doing it? What are the problems? And of course, what they really want to know is, how do I make it work in my company? So at first, I would just answer these questions as best I could. And I'd try to learn a little bit about their situation and how you might apply this to their situation. But it was kind of like ping pong, just back and forth. Not a lot of learning across one conversation to the next. But after a few months of that, I started to realize that, even though these companies are in very different businesses, they're asking kind of similar questions. And that's when the penny dropped. And I thought, aha, if I can create a gathering of these companies and get them together in person to share what they're doing, I can tell them anything they want to know about open innovation, and I will, but it's much better to do it in a group where we can learn from each other rather than having it be that ping pong back and forth, one at a time. So that became the Berkeley Innovation Forum that was launched in 2005. And Solomon and I are managing that organization to this day, more than 18 years later. And this forum is the source of our members that in turn are the sources of our challenges that we want to talk to you about. So remember how I said that it's really helpful to have a problem or a challenge to start with, to then pull the theory in. That's what we're doing here with you and with our members. So that's kind of the background to that. Now, the Garwood Center, a well-kept secret, as Andrew is saying, is basically, it was the Center for Open Innovation until David Garwood died and left a nice bequest to Haas. And so Dean Lyons was looking for which center at Haas could best use these resources and decided that the Center for Open Innovation was a good place for that. So we renamed ourselves from Open Innovation to the Garwood Center, and we changed it from Open Innovation to Corporate Innovation. So there are lots and lots of places on campus, and even at Haas, where there's a lot of focus on startups, new ventures, venture capital, venture financing, social ventures, all these great things. But we thought there was a bit of a gap in what happens when those ventures grow up, become large, scale. What do we do at Haas to understand and analyze them? So we thought, let's move our center into that space for corporate innovation. So we have done a better job, I think, of connecting with companies, and we haven't done as good a job of connecting with you all, the students. So that's one of our goals for today, is to start fixing that. So let me pause here. If there are any questions so far, I'm going to start now talking about open innovation in a little more depth. But before I do that, any questions about what I've said so far? Okay, good. Also, we've recorded this session. Is that okay? Good. And that way, in the future, people will have reference to this, and some of these questions will be answered even before we get into the room together. So let's talk about open innovation. Open innovation is a story of how organizations innovate. And historically, it studies a change in how that process happened. Not that long ago, most innovation was organized inside of very large corporate laboratories, typically called research and development labs. If you're in the life sciences, for example, all the major pharmaceutical companies, if you looked in their portfolio of products in the late 1990s or early 2000s, most of the projects in their portfolio came out of internal R&D activities. If you look at those same companies today, 20 years later, I can't think of a single company that has more than half of its portfolio from internal projects. Most companies have only 10 or 20% of their projects coming from inside. Most of the projects they're working on and carrying to market come from the outside now. That's a change. That's happened around, and that change coincides more or less with the publication of my book, so I got lucky on the timing. I found something that was going on. I found a way to describe it. I gave lots of examples of it. I even wrote a book on it, and lo and behold, it really changed, as the book was saying. Now, in the book, I was looking at companies not just in the life sciences. I did a lot of stuff in the IT sector, particularly at Xerox and its Palo Alto Research Center over in Palo Alto, which this April, Xerox donated PARC to a different nonprofit, Stanford Research Institute. So just this year, my work at PARC kind of came to a close with Xerox kind of abandoning, you might say, that lab, donating it to SRI. Now notice they didn't sell it. They didn't hold an IPO. They didn't do an SPAC with it. They literally had to give it away. So that's kind of interesting itself. So when I was studying at Xerox, and my research started in the late 1990s, was internal research projects in their labs. And my research started when the internal funding for those projects stopped. And then my task in my research was, well, what happened to those projects once the internal funding was cut? Because this lab was in Palo Alto, right in the heart of Silicon Valley. And so I started with 35 of these projects. And as I followed them, and there was each year there was a reunion of the Xerox PARC alumni in Menlo Park. And I went to the reunion and got to meet a lot of these people and hear their stories. So I was actually reconstructing what happened in each of these 35 cases. It turned out that most of them were able to raise money and start a new company. 30 of the 35 even had a license from Xerox to take the technology with them to go do this. And most of them, however, when they did this, they failed. Because, doing venture, it's not easy. I'm sure we've told you this, but it's true. However, 10 of the 35 did succeed, became publicly traded companies. And by the end of my study in the early 2000s, if you added up the market cap of those 10 projects, now publicly traded companies, the aggregate value of those 10 companies was more than twice the market value of Mother Xerox, where they came from. And if you think back to the time of academic theory, in this period of time, we were all studying Michael Porter. You've probably heard of him. And the five forces, a very famous historian at Harvard named Alfred Chandler that was talking about the visible hand and the things you can do in coordinating in large organizations to be innovative. These were some of the dominant theories of our time. And all this information I was surfacing from Xerox and Xerox PARC, none of that fit with those theories. Because, if Michael Porter's trying to leverage the five forces, how do we deal with things that spin out from the company, raise venture capital from a different pot of money, and then go after a different market with a different business model? None of that is in the five forces. So now we have to use the data and go back to the theory, and that's where open innovation took shape. And so open innovation has two main components to it. It's all about flows of knowledge across organizational boundaries for both monetary and non-monetary purposes. So that's the definition of open innovation. Knowledge flows across organizational boundaries. And there are two primary directions of concern. One is the outside into our organization. So think of those life science companies finding compounds out of university academic medical research centers and then licensing those compounds from those inventors for their own further development and commercialization. That would be an example of the outside in. And if indeed in pharmaceuticals these days, you can really think of it kind of like a baton being passed in a relay race. Because usually a lot of the research starts in the academic medical space, but those guys aren't entrepreneurs, and they don't want to be entrepreneurs. They're scientists, and they want to be scientists. So typically after they create these new discoveries and they license them, the baton gets passed. And often when the baton is passed, it sometimes goes to a big pharma, but more typically it goes to a much more focused pharma or biotech company that is able and willing to take a pretty rough idea and start the process of commercializing it, which means, among other things, completing all the clinical tests in animals and starting the process of testing them in humans. And usually that's when the big pharmas get interested, is once the drug is in human trials, okay, we know what to do now. We know how to take it the rest of the way. And by the way, those phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 clinical studies, most of the money being spent is in the phase 3. So it's no longer a game for little scrappy startups. You need a big bank account, and you need a lot of relationships and a lot of knowledge of how to do this. And so the big companies do that. So that is now how pharma drugs are often developed, in this baton being passed. So one flow of information in open innovation is that outside-in flow of knowledge. But there's a second flow of knowledge. It's much more typical of the Xerox spin-offs I was telling you about. That's from the inside out. So in the case of Park, we had all these things that went outside. Most of them did fail. 10 of them were major successes. Think of companies like 3Com or Adobe or Documentum or some of the best known that came out of this. And so the inside out is interesting because you are taking the knowledge that you have, but you aren't sure what to do with it or how best to use it. And so instead of trying to sort that out yourself, which is what they used to do, more and more, if it doesn't fit with us in our business and our business model, using the inside-out process means let's partner or engage with others and use that to figure this out. So let me give you a kind of a current-day example of that. We're all talking about large language models and generative artificial intelligence these days. Well, if you go back 15, 20 years, most of the smart people and most of the research being done in artificial intelligence was being done first in universities and computer science departments, and secondly, large company labs like IBM. IBM had big research programs in artificial intelligence, way ahead of what all the startups were doing at the time. So much so that back in 2011, IBM famously packaged up what it was doing and competed in this televised Jeopardy competition against the two humans who had won the most money ever playing Jeopardy. And Watson, which was the name of this project for IBM, Watson crushed the humans. And so that was an interesting demonstration and sort of proved that computers could actually do semantics. And you could give them an answer. If you know the Jeopardy format, you're given the answer and you have to formulate the question that goes with the answer. So you have to do some really clever things in language if you're doing computing to address that. But they did it. So what do? They've got this cool technology. They've just got this big demonstration on nationally publicized television that shows that they're good at it. So they create a business. And they create a business unit in IBM called cognitive computing. And in this business unit, they go after diagnostic radiology as the best way to use this capability and solve real problems. And the US healthcare system, it's expensive, it's very complex, it's a mess. So IBM said there's real money to be made here. So off they go. And Watson is now taken to all these various academic research facilities and offered as a service to them. But notice so far, the knowledge came from IBM's internal labs. The go-to-market was all done inside of IBM. And they didn't have any distributors, no integrators, no third parties, no consultants. No one else could see what was inside the black box. No APIs, no reference designs, no software development kits. It was just us and our customers, nobody else in between. So in open innovation parlance, this was a very closed way to develop your technology. As it happens, it turned out not to be successful either. IBM actually sold off this part of its business to Francisco Partners, a private equity company, in 2020. The price wasn't disclosed, but that tells you something too, because you've seen the price tags with AI projects. If it's big enough to be material, you have to disclose it. This was not big enough to be material. So after years and years of commercial exploration and more years of research beforehand, IBM worked really hard but didn't come up with very much. Meanwhile, there are companies like Google looking at artificial intelligence, and Google, although they have a lot of their own research activities, in 2008 they acquired a company from the UK called DeepMind. And most of the AI at Google originates from this acquisition and the people that came with that. And we shouldn't lose that. We talk about knowledge and technology and all the rest, but a lot of it gets down to people. And DeepMind had a really good set of people doing this work. And they go to Google, and Google's got a great search engine business already. But they're farsighted, they're very technically advanced, they think AI is cool, so they buy the company and they don't fire the people, they keep them there and they give them money and put them to work. What they don't do, they don't commercialize a lot of the work that's being done by DeepMind. And these are very capable, very bright people, kind of like the people at Xerox PARC back in the 1990s who have these ideas for new projects. Xerox doesn't know what to do with them, so they go out and try it their own way. A lot of the companies we're hearing about now in the Valley doing AI, if you trace back the genealogy of the people that are there, a lot of them came from DeepMind. And the reason they left Mother Google, which has all this capability, all this research, all this compute power, and all this data, why would you ever leave? Well, because they don't ever take it to market. They don't commercialize it. They're sort of sitting on it. Meanwhile, up in Redmond, Washington, Microsoft does have a deep research organization called Microsoft Research. They're doing all kinds of research in various aspects of computing, including artificial intelligence. But to Microsoft's great credit, when Sam Altman goes up to Redmond to show them what they're working on in OpenAI, Microsoft, instead of pursuing its internal research projects in AI, they think, wow, these guys are making real progress. This is really happening. Maybe we can find a way to partner with them and accelerate what they're doing. So in open innovation language, this is outside in. Even though Microsoft has Microsoft Research and a lot of smart people, this stuff comes from the outside in. And then OpenAI, they put in $1 billion, and they're now in the process of putting in another $10 billion. So it's been a really interesting partnership. And now suddenly Google is getting challenged in the search business in a way they haven't been challenged in a long time. And so that's stimulating a lot of other stuff. And we're not done, because alongside what Microsoft and OpenAI are doing and what Google is doing, we have companies like Anthropic that are helping you understand where your data come from and are making representations that your data, when you use our engine, we will not use your experience to train our models. So they're starting to provide protections for the data. Other companies like Facebook are creating, or Meta, are introducing projects called Llama that are open source. So now you can actually see the code. And not just the code, you can see the model weights that they're using to train the model based on the data they're getting. So we started with this very closed model of IBM. And although the thing is still unfolding, you can already see a trend toward more and more openness in this space. And so I don't know exactly where it's all going to end up, but I do think it's going to end up in a pretty open place. Not just the code, not just the model weights, but also the data itself and where it comes from and what usage is made of the data. So that's some current day open innovation perspective. So with that, let me take questions on open innovation, and then I'm going to throw to Solomon to talk about challenges. Questions about any of that? Yeah.
So I think this is a very interesting topic on data monetization that you are talking about. There's a lot of things on privacy. Now you're having additional techniques also. You can add noise to the original data, and then you can create a lot of sample data sets, and then you can probably monetize the insights, if not own the data. And this is something that I also spoke to, I think, Professor also, and to other folks also. I'm not seeing much research into how do you value data as an asset in itself. Not, that's easy, the product and use cases we all know. But how do you really see data as an asset? What kind of financial model research is happening in that sense? That's something I wanted to
Right. So that could be, I don't think it is at the moment, one of the challenges, but that could be a challenge for the companies we work with. Because we're working with you today to kind of plug you into some active, ongoing things where companies are trying to figure stuff out. This could be one of the things that companies are trying to figure out. And as your question suggests, the answer is going to depend on your business model. In the case of every time we do Google searches, we don't pay for the product because we are the product. And Google is using our search experience to update their databases. And they have models to value those things, all premised on us doing it for free for them. So that's a very different model than, say, Anthropic, which is offering some protections. And so they're going to have the same amount of data is going to have a different value because it's being expressed through different business models. I think it's a mistake to say there's going to be one-size-fits-all valuation for data because it's too context dependent. And in this case, the key context is the business model being used to commercialize it. One of the challenges we did have in an earlier year was with Ericsson, and they were very interested in open source software. And so the project team studied some of the major open source projects that are out there and documented the different licenses that they use and the different obligations companies working with them take on. So again, it's not one size fits all. It depends on the context. Oh, we're just in time. Come on in. So the project was to help them figure out these different models, and then they showed what some of the companies using each of these models, how did the company organize internally to work with the open source communities. So that's another step in the process, is once we decide to work with these guys, how do we organize it? And that was what the research project was about. Let me pause for a second. Let's get the pizza going, guys. They just left.
The main people left.
Yeah, let's get the pizza going.
All right. Who's going to get some plates?
Plates, okay. Yeah, we probably will want that.
Yeah.
All right, so I will take another question while we're waiting for that.
Why do you think Watson didn't work out? Why did IBM decide to sell it?
So you should be suspicious of any super simplistic explanation, but I'm going to give you a simplistic explanation that I think captures at least a part of it. Watson had an ability to do lots of things that were possible. And if you think about it for a moment, that creates a problem. If you can do lots of these things, where do you focus? They chose to focus on diagnostic radiology, but they could have focused in lots of other areas. Solomon led a project where they were actually reading patents and creating patent maps for companies to figure out how you map your intellectual property. They could have used it that way. So the error was they had a very general purpose technology, but they targeted a very specific application. When OpenAI came out last November with ChatGPT-3, they introduced it and they didn't have any application for it. They didn't have any business model for it. They said, we're putting this out there for research. And they didn't quite say it, but what they were researching is what do we humans do with it when they put it in our hands? And now, months and months later, and 100 million active users later, they have a lot of ideas about how they can apply this technology. So they were more open about how to use it than IBM was. So I think that's at least one of the lessons from IBM's experience. When you've got a very powerful general purpose technology, could be IoT, could be blockchain, could be 5G, could be, gosh, all these, think of genomics and gene editing, et cetera. Lots of ways you can use this stuff. Don't lock in too early on one application. Find ways to more openly engage and collaborate and let that collaboration process help steer you. Does that help?
Yeah, thank
You buy it?
you.
Okay.
I thought about it that way.
Well, on a good day, some of this open innovation stuff will have you looking at the world around us and maybe asking some questions you might not have thought to ask before. So just before we leave AI, where's the data coming from? How about the compute? There's a lot of compute needed to do this, which means it's capital intensive, which means it needs money. So, looking at these things, and then how open is this stuff? If you're going to support an entire compute stack, you need a lot of scale. One great way to get scale is to open up and get more people using it.
So I'm curious, what's in it for the large tech companies to open source what they're working on? Basically, like we've seen it in the database wars, like where there's proprietary Oracle databases and then open source just disrupts it. Same, we see it happening with OpenAI and Microsoft trying to have proprietary AI and then Llama kind of trying to disrupt that. So why do large enterprises like just open source what they're working on? Yeah.
I love your question, and I also love that you brought Oracle into the question, because Oracle is kind of like, they started in the 1970s, and for a long time they were as closed a company as you could hope to find. They did some good stuff too, by the way. I think if you got any large company to sit down with you over a couple of beers, they would tell you, if we could control all of it ourselves, we would prefer to do that. The message of open innovation is that no company, no matter how big you are, no matter how good you are, there's too much useful knowledge and too many very smart people out there for any one company to try to do it all themselves. So even though your instinct would be to control it all, in the world that we're exploring in open innovation, and it's not just in IT. I mentioned the pharmaceutical industry. I've got many other examples in energy and elsewhere too. There's just a lot of smart people doing a lot of interesting things way beyond what any company can do on their own. So that's kind of the base of the answer, is where's the knowledge? Where are the really good people working in these places? How do we engage with them? We can't hire them all and put them on our payroll. How do we engage with them and get leverage from them? So that's where the strategy of open innovation comes in. How can we, for example, we may have a piece of our stack that we do open source, and that carries people to a place where maybe we've got a proprietary control point. So anything that drives more volume to our proprietary control point, we know how that works. So that's one example of a strategy that uses open source and open innovation to create more money. It's simple, but it's the kind of question, depending on the organization, there are lots of ways to answer it.
So you spoke about,
Yes,
you spoke
thanks.
about corporates, you spoke about universities and startups being involved in the open innovation process. Do you see other players such as the government coming in and also being valuable in this ecosystem?
Right. So we have a meeting coming up in 2 weeks where we're having TSMC come talk to our members. And they are in the midst of doing exactly this in semiconductor manufacturing right here in the US of A, armed with more than $50 billion of subsidy, and a lot of things are going into that. It is not a success yet. We don't know for sure. I'm sure they'll build something, and I'm sure they'll make chips. But whether it will ever be globally competitive with what Taiwan is able to do or South Korea has to be demonstrated. We don't know. For sure, it's not just going to be a single company or a single plant. There's going to be a whole ecosystem that feeds into that. There's going to be a whole supply chain that supports that. So you've got to open up the aperture to really understand how to do that. Governments, unfortunately, sometimes like things like this because it's targeted, it's focused, it's easier to sell to your voters. And the thing politicians want to know is how many jobs? And there will be jobs. If things go well, there are going to be lots of jobs and probably good paying jobs. But they're not going to all be in one place in one company. They're going to be distributed in lots of places. So yes, government does have a role to play. In different regions, the government plays a different role. So again, this is another thing where you can't say there's one best role for government because it's going to be different in different contexts. Let me take one more, and then I want to get us to our pizza. Do we have plates?
I think we have plates and napkins, but I think just in the interest of time, because we're supposed to be wrapping up with the programming in 15 minutes, it might be beneficial.
All right, I'll stick around for questions after.
We have the room until 1.
Yeah, I'll stick around.
We have all the pizza, but just for folks that have to take off, what might be beneficial now is
Yeah, thank you, Andrew.
to do like a 3-minute overview of just each of the 5 challenges that we have, and then talk a little bit about the Berkeley Innovation Forum application process, and then
I have been with Haas for about 20 years now, and Henry and I taught both in the AM, PM, weekend, all those MBA programs, but now I'm very focused on working with corporate executives of these 40 companies that Henry and I have been working with about their challenges, the solutions to their problems, and engaging our students. So all of these companies, we have 30 of them, they're very much excited about working with you and coming up with a solution to the challenges in this very competitive world. So we have 5 of them. I think we like to take, there's one time we did 10. So we are only doing 5 this time because we feel that we wanted to deliver high quality of product to these. There'll be about 4 to 5 of you that will be selected for each of these challenges. And we're inviting you to our Berkeley Innovation Forum. We have 3 evenings, and you can sit at the dinner table if you're selected with some of these executives. So that's about maybe 30 people over the period of 3 years. I'm sorry, 3 days. And you will be able to interact with them and they with you and understanding these challenges from Nestle and Urenco and all of those companies there, Porsche. And so I think that will give you an opportunity to meet with them, engage with them, and ask more questions. And then the following week, we will select the teams, and then you will present your solutions to the entire Berkeley Innovation Forum. In April 15th or so, we have a forum. How many of you have seen our agenda that's coming up? Berkeley Innovation Forum agenda. If you haven't, there it is. It's a great agenda. You meet all those wonderful CEOs and people, very powerful people, and you get to work with them and also meet with them if you're selected. And the selection process is, we have 120 applications so far. But we will be taking among that about 25 people or so based on your passion and your interest level and also the match and skill set. And so we are off to a very great please take a look at that and understand that. And we want you to sign up to, I think, where's Risa? The form. You want-
BIF attendance.
Yeah, go ahead and talk about the how they fill out that form so we know if they're really interested.
Yeah. So, and I'll just take the mic so I'm
Yeah.
recording it.
Sure.
So just really high level. So there's two things. If you're interested in the challenges and want to be a part of these projects, and again, we'll run through these super quickly, just high level, some of the key points of each of these in a second. There's an apply now button for that. It's like through the product management. It's like the term is product manager, but working with the actual teams. And this is where we're going and just collecting information to be considered for those positions. If you're free and around and interested in being a part of the Berkeley Innovation Forum, we ask that you fill out this secondary sheet, this BIF attendance, and I'll make a post about this tonight through the Haas Tech Club and all that as well. But it's right next to it, and this helps us know who can come every night and who can kind of make the forum. The large goal here is like we want over the course of the 3 or 4 days of the conference, we want to get like 30 to 40 students there, just mixing, working with professionals. They get a lot of value from students, being able to work with them during the conversations, but also just in networking and talking and hearing about your experience at Haas. But this is, and then from that as well, we're hoping that the folks that ultimately end up on these challenges make sure that they can attend this conference if possible, because that's where you're going to have the opportunity to meet with the executives and the teams that you're working with. So if you're still interested in this after the open house today, definitely fill out this attendance form. And then again, we'll make sure that we have, students like, again, the best kept secret at Haas. I really stumbled into this last year, but I had dinner with the Secretary General of the Commonwealth of Nations, and we had a wonderful talk on the access to Wi-Fi and developing countries. It's really, really awesome. Highly recommend you apply and check this out. But we have so apply for the program manager and make sure to just mark when you can attend the forum. We'll try to cycle through so different students get a chance to go every night or every day, just so there's like some, I know particularly for first years, there's a lot of conflicting core classes. So just fill in your availability and we'll work off of that. Do you want to give a quick overview of the 5 challenges and then we can release people for pizzas and questions?
Yes, Nestle, I think we can see the open. Just open it up, and the challenge is posted right here. And Nestle is trying to see in this world of generative AI, how does Nestle establish trust compared to all the other products that are out there, feeding pets, food products for pets. So I think they like your ideas. So if you go through each challenge, I think they're very self-explanatory, but they have an AI component, generative AI component to it. So I think you should be passionate about the project you take and indicate which of those evenings that you like to join us, because we like to have not all of you in one day. We would like to spread you over the 3 nights, dinners at each table, and we will assign you to a table where you will be able to sit with that group, whether it's Porsche or Nestle, and engage with them. But also during the day, you can drop in. Yeah. Even during the day, you can come in, and we have a booth there. I think Risa is going to have a table there about this particular group, and you can meet and shake hands with many of those executives and get to know them, and they get to know you. And even if you're not coming for the dinner, so just drop in. And it's right at the Coliseum here at the California Memorial Stadium on the top. And so you're very welcome to come and take advantage of the beautiful view we have there and the venue. All right, can they fill this out? Is that very easy to? Yeah. Okay. Where's the one that has all those boxes where which day they're coming? I think that's an important. That's the one that. Yeah, this one here will determine which night you will be coming to dine with the corporate executives, so we can assign you. So this is something that you need to do because it'll be on a first come first served basis, and also on your interest level. For the project.
And again, like I recognize there's core econ, there's lead comm if you're an EW MBA or you're a second year, like half of our classes are at night. So just where you can attend, totally fine. We just want to give everyone an opportunity to attend. That's the most important thing. Yes.
Yeah. Hi,
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, we'll go through and there'll be name tags and everything for you, and we'll give a lot of additional details about this when we get a chance to organize the schedule. But this will dictate how we go about inviting folks. As far as the application process goes, so we'll start reviewing like the resumes and interests forms beginning as soon as Friday. So this is going to close tonight. So it's been out there for like 3 weeks now. But make sure to go in and fill that out if you haven't already tonight, and then we'll start to go through this weekend and next week. And then as early as the 18th, so that would be the Monday following the conference, we'll start to release the final teams to these different companies, and we'll go from there. Just a couple notes. If you're not selected the first time around, it's insanely competitive, actually. We ended up having like 120 applications, which is huge. Really, really, really awesome that there's so much interest. We're looking to kick off another round of these in January. We're always looking to have 5 of these rotating on an annual basis. So particularly if you're a first year, the upcoming January deadline and the next September are both great opportunities to get plugged in again if it doesn't work out this time. There's additional roles outside of specific challenge teams. I'm not mapped to any challenge. I'm just kind of helping to oversee everything, and we'll be looking for someone to come in and help out with that going forward. And we're hoping to have more of a workshop advisory sort of setting for these going forward as well. So if you're interested in corporate innovation beyond just coursework with Bill Pierce and whatnot here on campus, we're going to have opportunities to do that in practice as well.
It's semi-annual, not annual.
Semi-annual. Yes. The other thing to call out is there'll be another, like I said, if you can't attend right now and the time commitment doesn't seem feasible, there's another conference in the spring. We'll probably do another call in a similar way to get students interested and involved in that, if it's local. And yeah, just calling out these, again, I can't really emphasize how awesome this program is and how we kind of stumbled upon it last year and how excited we are to be building this back up. There's a lot of really, really interesting, if you spend some time in these projects, both concepts and academic areas being studied, but also just outcomes and projects. Like, one of these you're working with a chief nuclear officer. Another one, it's expanding EVs in Asian markets. Some of these have the opportunity to attend COP28 and present the work that you're doing paid by the firm. So really, this is firms are very, very excited about working with Haas students on these, and we're really excited to bring you all to them as well. So definitely apply. Think long and hard about the ones that you're most interested in. Again, some of these are going to be more marketing oriented. Some of these are design thinking. There's an ESG angle on some of them, emerging tech on others. So try to find where your interests align. I think that's the best advice that I could throw out there. But I think, is there anything else that you want to plug in at this point?
Konica is another one. It's a chemical company. Konica is a very interesting project. They have a lab down here. They're creating, we can replace all the plastics now with this new bacteria that grows. And apparently the material, of course, we had to kill the bacteria to make the plastic from that, but it's biodegradable. Very, very sustainable product. They're very excited. It's called the Green Planet Project. It's all about sustainability. If you are a sustainability freak, that's a great thing, and you get to visit them. You'll be working with their chief science officer also here. And Wipro also has a sustainability bent to it. They are the ones who are inviting us to go to COP, a program there in Saudi Arabia. It's in Dubai, I think, right? Dubai. So wherever your passion leads you, I think you can go there and read them up nicely. If you have any questions, you can always email me, and I can answer more specific questions.
I just had a quick question. How is the selection being done? Because the form requests very basic information, but you mentioned matching skill sets, and also will you request more information from us in the future? How will it work?
Yeah. So literally, we're just going through the. It's a combination of amount of time that we can work, and then LinkedIn profiles, and then we'll follow up as stuff's needed. Candidly, a lot of this is going to be, we're going to have conversations with folks next week. It's going to be I don't want to say full on interviews, just it's going to be shorter, just getting to know people. You don't need to worry so much about if your skills are not a perfect alignment. I know companies are looking for people that have some working experience, but largely they're looking for just passion and general interest in the projects more broadly. I think I want to be conscious of everyone's. I'll go for it. Was there a specific resume drop in here as well, or was it just? No, it was or wasn't. Okay, then we'll follow up with that after this. Thank you. That's a good call out. I think so. We do have this room until 1. I want to be conscious of everybody's time. So I think what we can do now is we can set up the pizzas. I know I can stay around and help answer questions around this. I don't know if Professors Chesbrough and Darwin can. Okay, so people can stay around. Yeah, so if you. Perfect. Awesome. So if you need to get pizza and run, totally cool. If you want to stay around and ask questions, that's absolutely fine. But yeah, thank you all for coming, and hopefully we'll see some of you at the forum in a couple weeks. Thank you.